Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's start our Tuesday class with some prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Om Bho Bhava Swaha, Tatsavitra Varenyam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodayat, Asto Ma Satgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamya. Om Sena Vavatu Seno Bhunatu Saviryam Karvavahi Tejasvi Navadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So today is our Mahabharata day. So page number 759. The besotted Keechaka. And Keechaka is the name of a Senapati, who is this brother of that queen of Virata also. Sudeshan did not send Draupadi to her brother at once. She waited 2 weeks in the hope that good sense would dawn on him. She thought that perhaps he had been so lonely during his long campaign that he had lost control of himself. She prayed that a few nights in his palace with his wives would cool some of his hard work. Instead, daily a messenger came from Keechaka asking why she delayed keeping her word. On the 7th day, a servant came and told Sudeshan her brother had taken to his bed. He neither ate nor drank or saw any of his wives or children. He did not go to the court, but seemed ill for his very life. The queen sent a message back that this very day at noon he should wait for the flower girl. Sudeshna sent for Draupadi. Just a fortnight remained of the Pandav's exile. The Matsya queen had even hoped she could see the year through and then Malini would leave Virat. It was not to be, and Sudeshan loved Keechaka too much to let him languish as he did. When Draupadi came into her room, she found Sudeshan in bed. The queen said, I am feeling unwell, Malini. I hear Keechaka has brought some herbal wine from his campaign. Take this carafe to his palace and fetch me some. She did not look at her flower girl directly. Draupadi said, just 2 weeks remain for me to leave your palace. I beg you, don't send me to your brother for the wine. And why is that? He made advances to me in the garden. I did not tell you because I thought you would be upset. If you send me to his palace, he will take advantage of me. All these months you have looked after me as your own daughter. Just 14 days remain before I vanish from your life. Don't send me to Keechaka now. Guilty but determined, Sudeshna said furiously, how dare you? My brother is a Kshatriya. He would never stoop to making advances to a maid. You have become arrogant, Malini, and lazy. This is just an excuse to avoid the chore. Go and fetch me the wine at once. Keechaka will hardly notice you, let alone lay a finger on you. It is your vanity that makes you think every man who sees you must desire you. Draupadi opened her mouth to speak, but Sudeshan held up an imperious hand and cried, I don't want to hear another word. Go and fetch the wine. I am thirsty. Tears in her eyes, Draupadi took the silver carafe from the queen. Neither woman looked at the other, and this Sarandri walked out without another word. Trembling in every limb, Draupadi came out into the day. The sun was overhead, and in despair she prayed, Surya Dev, I beg you, by my chastity, protect me from Keechaka. The sun heard her and sent an invisible Rakshas to watch over Panchali. Keechaka was at his window waiting. When he saw the flower girl making her way through Sudeshan's garden towards his palace, he ran down his stairway. He flung open his front door and stood beaming at her. Come in, cried Keechaka, and Draupadi quailed when she saw the look in his eyes. She said, my lord, I have come to fetch some wine for your sister, the queen. He winked at her. You have even brought a carafe to fill. I will send the wine with someone else. You come with me. Let me show you my bed of swan's down. Since the day we met, I have had it made up for you and covered with the malika flowers. Cruel one, how long you have made me wait. How much you have made me pine for you. It has been worth the anguish. Just look at you, how perfect you are. Oh, my love, you are the most beautiful woman on earth. Give me that carafe and let me feast my eyes on you. She stood frozen before him and said again, I have come for wine for the queen and not for your pleasure, my lord Keechak. I beg you, fill the carafe and let me go back. A spasm of darkness twitched on his face. Keechak's voice grew hard. Fill the carafe and let you go? You must be mad to think I would let you go just like that. Soft as a hunting cat, he moved between her and the door. He shut it behind his back. He loomed over her for a moment, then seized her wrist and pulled her to him. Draupadi screamed and flailed out at him. At that moment, it was not just she who struck him, but the Surya Rakshasa who had come in with her, invisibly. Keechak staggered back and fell. Momentarily, Draupadi stood astonished. Then she wrenched the door open and fled. She knew she could not run back to Sudeshan. She would find no refuge with the queen, her hair streaming behind her like a black cloud, her clothes slipping off her dark body. Draupadi ran towards King Virat's palace. With a roar, Keechak sprang up and went after her. He caught her again as she flew through his garden and flung his arms around her. He meant to ravish her out in the open, as he had done countless women in far-flung cities he had plundered. Draupadi's screams rang through the afternoon, and again the Surya Rakshas struck Keechak, knocking him down. Draupadi's screams brought Bhim running out of his kitchen. He saw Keechak flung down and Panchali fleeing from him towards Virat's court. Bhim rushed to pull up a tree in the king's yard to smash Keechak down. Then Kanak the gambler was at his side, hissing, everything will be lost if you do this. There were others called out by Draupadi's screams. Yudhishthir said aloud, this tree is still guarded. You can't use it for firewood. Somehow Bhim controlled himself, but now Keechak was up and flying after Draupadi. And Yudhishthir and Bhim went after him. Panting, weeping, her clothes awry and her hair disheveled, Draupadi ran into Virat Sabha with Keechak hot on her heels. When she was near the throne, he caught up with her. He kicked her down at the Maya king's feet and stood raging over her. Panchali wailed, Virat, look what happens to one who has sought refuge in your kingdom. I'm a married woman, and this animal means to ruin me. I have come to you for sanctuary, for though I have 5 husbands, they won't help me today. Yudhishthir was at the king's side, and Bhim was in the court, his eyes on fire. It was a moment when anything could happen. Yudhishthir contained Bhim with a look. But what was he going to do about Draupadi, who was beside herself? She cried again at Virat. You saw him kick me, O king. I ask you for justice. But Keechak was the Senapati of the king's army. He was Sudeshan's brother, and Virat dare not cross him. Mildly, Virat said, young woman, I only saw what happened here in the Sabha. I did not see what happened outside or how you provoked Keechak. Surely he is not too angry without reason. Moreover, Keechak is our Senapati, and I suggest you leave our Sabha, Sarandri. Yudhishthir still had to restrain not only his own anger, but his wild brother with a warning look. But there were others in that Sabha who knew Keechak well and were less afraid of him than the king was. Some of them spoke up. The young woman is noble. We know Keechak. He must have tried to molest her. Whatever the provocation, he should not kick a woman. Yudhishthir saw Draupadi's eyes fill again. He also saw the rage in them. He was terrified that just 2 weeks before their exile ended, she would give everything away and tell Virat who she was. Kanak said, Sarandri, you heard the king. Go back to the queen's apartment. Your Gandharva husbands will know the injustice done to you and see it punished. Perhaps the time is not right and they don't care to be cursed again after their long penance. Only 15 days more and you will be free. Wait until then before you seek justice. Go now, go back to your room. The Sarandri did not move. Her jaw was set, and Yudhishthir saw the stubbornness in her eyes. Malini said, King of the Matsyas, you have no dharma. Kanak the gambler cried, Sarandri, Virat is the most righteous of men. And look at you, young woman, with your clothes in disarray, your hair loose, crying immodestly in a court full of men. You look like an actress. Go back to your apartment. With a moan, Draupadi straightened her hair. She set her clothes right and wiped her tears. Her eyes flashing, she said to Yudhishthir, You are right, O wise man, to call me an actress here. But it is only because my first husband is a gambler that my other husbands have to be cowards today. With a scowl at the Sabha in general, she stalked out. Ballava, the king's cook, had already left. It seemed 12 years in the forest had taught him a sound lesson in patience. Even he would not risk another exile when only 14 days remained for their Agyatwas to end. With a sigh of relief, Yudhishthir settled down beside the king to a game of dice, but his heart raged within him. With a sneer on his lips, Keechaka also walked out of the court, more determined than ever to have the surrender. Next chapter, Ballav's night visitor. Back in her apartment in Sudeshan's palace, Draupadi locked herself in and wept. She felt defiled. Tearing off her clothes, she made a pile of them and set them on fire. She went and bathed long and sorrowfully. At last, feeling somewhat cleansed, though not in her mind, she came out and dressed. There was a knock at the door, and not bothering to wipe her tears, she went to open it. Sudeshan stood there. The queen saw her Sarandri red-eyed and still crying. She took Draupadi's hands and said, What happened, my child? Why are you crying? With a sob, Draupadi pulled free and flashed at her. How can you pretend to be so innocent? You sent me to your brother, and you knew what he wanted. How can you ask me now why I am crying? She saw Sudeshan also had tears in her eyes. The queen sat down on the Sarandri's bed and said in a low voice, Tell me what happened, Malini. I swear I did not mean to hurt you, only that my brother was frantic to meet you. Sobbing, Draupadi described everything that happened. Sudeshna, who was terrified for Keechak, tried her best to console her Sarandri, but the young woman ended viciously. My Gandharv husbands have heard what happened, and your brother won't live long. Sudeshan rose and ran from the room. The sun set on the world outside. Still Draupadi sat on her bed, staring glassily out of her window while shame and rage had their way with her. She must see Keechak dead. Nothing short of that would do. He dare lay his filthy hands on her. He dare kick her. He did not know her. She was a flame. She would consume him. She did not eat. She did not sleep or even lie down. She sat there like a fierce statue, plotting Keechak's death. Slowly a plan formed in her mind. Near midnight, she rose and walked out of her apartment. Around her, the palace slept. Like an avenging spirit on the prowl, she moved through the deserted passages, out into the mooned night, and into the king's palace through a back door. Grimly, she headed for the kitchens and the room behind them, where Ballava, the king's cook, slept. She glided into that room, seductive as moonlight. She went and lay beside him. With petal hands, she aroused him in his sleep. Smiling in his dream, Bhim reached for her. Then he opened his eyes. He gave a cry and sat bolt upright. Panchali, you must be mad to come here. What if someone saw you? She stopped his mouth with a kiss. She stripped away his clothes and made such tender love to him. When it was over and he lay in a fine swoon, she said, How can you sleep when your Panchali is in torment? Have you also become as hard-hearted as your brother? I can't believe it of you. Of the others, yes, but not of my Bhim. How can you sleep after seeing how the devil kicked me down in the Sabha, after you heard how he tried to violate me? Bhim said, You should never have come here. Suppose we are found together. It will be the end of everything. What would Yudhishthir say? Yudhishthir, how can you say his name after you heard him in the Sabha today? You look like an actress, Sarandri. Go back to your apartment. It is immodest to cry in front of so many men. And was that Keechak did modest? She was trembling next to him now, naked and wounded, and Bhim couldn't stand it much longer. Sensing victory, she pressed on. Yudhishthir has no honor left, or would he let Keechaka live after what he did to me? You were also there, Bhim. You did nothing either. Poor Bhim cried. I would have killed him. I would have razed this city, but Yudhishthir stopped me with his eyes. Yudhishthir has no feeling for me. All he wants to do is gamble. He is so happy after he learnt that mantra. Now he thinks he is the greatest dice player on earth. What does he care that Keechak tried to rape me? What does he care if his wife was kicked in a king's sabha? I want Keechak dead. I cannot hope for revenge from Yudhishthir because they are loyal to him. Arjun, Nakul, and Sahadev will not help me either. Oh, my Bhim, I can turn only to you. Only you are man enough to stand up to Yudhishthir. You have always loved me the most. You have always done anything I asked you, even if your brothers would not. Ah, Bhim, look at your Panchali's hands today. She held out her hands to him, and there were tears in Bhim's eyes. When he felt they were calloused, Draupadi sighed. From grinding perfumes for Virat and his queen, and they both betrayed me today. Oh, I am a cursed woman that no one loves me, she sobbed. Bhim wiped her tears. He kissed her again and again. Panchali, ah, Panchali, don't say that. You know how much I love you, more than any my life. Yudhishthir was right to stop me today. If we are discovered now, it is another 12 years in the jungle. Not you or I, nor any of us could stand there. Keechak is as good as dead, my love. Only wait 2 weeks. She drew away from him and sat up. Her eyes glittered, and she said harshly, I couldn't have dreamt you would be so heartless. You were my last hope. But if you won't kill Keechak, I must drink poison and die, for I know he will ravish me before your 2 weeks pass. She covered her face and with her hands and sobbed more than ever. Bhim melted. How could he resist her? He had a child's heart. For her sake, he would risk anything, even another 12 years of exile, worse than dying. Ah, don't cry, don't cry. He put his arms around her. My queen, don't cry. His life is not worth a single tear of yours. I will kill him for you tomorrow, but we must do it in secret, so no one knows. She wiped her tears at once, her woman's need satisfied. She smiled, kissing him feverishly, her eyes shining. She said, have you a plan, Bhim? He held her close and whispered, I knew you would come tonight, so I thought of a plan earlier. She laughed delightedly. Tell me your plan, Bhim. Send a message to Keechak. Tell him you only pretended to spurn him to inflame him more. She gasped. He went on. Tell him to meet you at midnight in the dance hall. Tell him there is a silk couch there, perfect for making love. And then tell him to come to you secretly. When he comes, he will find me in the dark, and I will kill him. Bhim, my love, I knew I could count on you, and we shall not even be discovered. I am grateful to God that you are my husband. You are the only one who's not a coward, the only one who really loves me. With a last lingering kiss, Draupadi floated out of Bhim's room, leaving him happy in the dark. In a short while, he slept again, snoring softly, drifting into dreams of heaven. The long day, the next chapter. The next morning, Draupadi went out to the little pavilion in the garden to plan how she would entice Keechak to the dance hall that night. She stood there, wondering if she should send a messenger or go to him herself. Suddenly, the man appeared, startling her. He wore a smile on his face and said, Malini, you saw the king is afraid of me. There is no one in Virat to stop me from having you. Won't it be wise for you to come to me yourself? She smiled sweetly at him. She let her hand brush his arm. He quivered at the fleeting touch and thought his heart would burst for joy when she said in a husky voice, My lord, I refuse you only from fear of my husband's. Which woman would spurn a man like you? Your strength makes me faint with desire. I have found a way for us to be together. Late at night, my gandharvas do not watch me, believing I am asleep. Meet me at the king's dance hall at midnight. There is a couch of silk there. The blood roared in his body. He was speechless. She whispered, I will wait for you at midnight. Come to me in the dark. But remember, don't tell a soul about our diaries, for my husbands can read men's minds. Keechak said hoarsely, I am mad for you, Malini. I could pluck the sun out of the sky, or midnight to come at once. She said, Go now, my lord, lest we are seen together. I will meet you in the night. Keechak went off with a song on his lips. Draupadi came to find him in his kitchen before the other cooks arrived. Flushed with excitement, she said to him, He will come to the dance hall at midnight. Don't fail me. Bhim. He will not live to see the dawn. Malini went back happily to her tasks of the day. Sudeshna was surprised to see her flower girl so completely recovered. She marveled that those lovely eyes, which had wept such tears, now shone with some mysterious joy. The queen did not mention the previous day, and neither did her Sarandri. It was a long day for three souls in the palaces of Virat. To Kichak, the hours seemed like weeks. To Draupadi and Bhim also. At last, the sun sank in the west, and twilight fell on the city of the Matsyas. It was the hour for drink and food. The king remarked that the dishes Ballava had conjured today were exceptional, even by his own lofty standards. He summoned the cook to commend him. Then the day wound down and the city turned in for the night. Lamps were put out as the people turned to love and sleep, but Keechak was awake. It was 10, then 11, and at last almost midnight. A slim moon had risen into the sky, shrouded in a long cloak, so no one recognized him. If anyone was about in the forbidden hour, when the souls of the dead roamed the earth, Keechak crept out to his secret assignation like an unquiet spirit himself. He stalked into the garden and down a central pathway towards the dance hall where Brihanal, the eunuch, gave her lessons by day. Angry Gandharvas. The next chapter. An hour before Keechak set out for the dance hall, Bhim stole out of his kitchen, wrapped in a length of silk. As he crept through the dark passages of the palace, a soft hand reached out of the night and startled him. It was Draupadi. Like two ghosts, they made their way to the dance hall. They pushed the tall doors open and went in. Silence reigned over the night. The sickle moon peered in through the windows, and they could dimly see the couch at the heart of the hall. Bhim went and lay on it and pulled the silk cloth over his head. Draupadi hid herself behind a pillar that rose to the ceiling nearby. They spoke in whispers for a while, and her excitement was palpable in the darkness. Tonight's revenge would be the beginning of a long redress that time owed her. Bhim said, It is nearly midnight. We must be quiet now. The moon rose above the palace, and now only the stars shone into the dance hall. In the stillness, Bhim could hear his own breathing like a sea, and Draupadi felt her heart pounding. At last they heard the door ease open. Keechak had arrived. He glowed in the dark. He was like the dying flare of a flame just before it goes out. Draupadi was as still as the pillar she stood behind. Bhim's stillness was of a beast of prey before it springs. Keechak shut the door softly behind him. He called into the dim hall, Are you there, my love? There was no answer. Then Bhim stirred where he lay, and Keechak caught his breath. In a moment, he crossed to the couch by starlight. He stood there gazing down at the silk covered from he thought was the woman he was mad for. Hoarsely, he said, This has been the longest day of my life, Malini. Ah, my love, you don't know how happy you have made me. He went on in a fever. When my women saw me, they said, How radiant you look today. I only smiled. He could not wait any more, and with a sigh, knelt beside the couch. Blindly, he reached for his love in the dark. Come to me, Malini. Two immense hands seized Keechak, and a terrible form rose from the couch. A deep voice growled, So you are radiant today, and so you should be, since you have come to meet the woman who loves you. Long she has courted you, Keechak, and tonight she asked me to deliver you to her. She is death, Senapati, and she is impatient to have you in her arms. The shocked Keechak breathed, Who are you? That veteran of 100 wars had no time to recover, but Bhim flung him down on his back, planted mighty knees across his arms and chest, and fastened inhumanly strong hands on his throat. Keechaka thrashed about, his legs kicking the air, but the rage of 13 years was in his assailant's grip. It was inexorable. Keechak's tongue lolled from his mouth, his eyes rolled up in his head. Panchali appeared ethereally from behind her pillar. In his final moment, the Matsya general saw her standing above him, joy on her dark face, ineffable triumph. With a sigh, Keechak subsided, his limbs twitched no more. But killing Keechak tapped a spring of savagery in Bhim. He was like a beast unleashed. While Draupadi stood watching, he mutilated the dead body. He kicked the corpse again and again. In frenzy, he broke its arms and legs and thrust them into the torso. So also the staring blue head. Bhim shoved it down into the chest as if in some exact ritual, he reduced the lifeless Keechak to a bloody lump of flesh. It seemed he was having revenge for what he, his brothers, and Draupadi had suffered for 13 years. His revenge on Duryodhan and Dushashan, on Karan, on all the Kauravas. Until at last, panting and dripping sweat, his hands and feet bloody, he stopped, and the frenzy left him. He lit the torch again and turned to Draupadi. There, my queen, are you satisfied now? She was a flame of fulfillment. Moaning, she came to him and flung her arms around his neck, kissing him searingly. She was like death pressed against him, soft and terrible. A little taken aback, he freed himself from her embrace. He said, we must not be found here together. I will leave, but you stay, so the world will beware of you from now. Bhim slipped out of the dance hall, leaving her alone with the mangled Keechak. A current of joy in her blood, a great hope like she had not felt for 13 years. Panchali ran out into the passage and shouted for the palace guards. She brought them into the dance hall and showed them Keechak on the floor. He wouldn't believe me when I told him about my Gandharva husbands. Look at your Senapati now. The guards ran out of crying. Keechak is dead. The Sarandris Gandharvas have killed Keechak. In no time, the dance hall was full of people, terror stroking them when they saw their invincible general's corpse. Keechak's 105 half-brothers arrived there. The dazed Upakeechaks, King Virat, and Queen Sudeshna came there and wept. The Upakeechaks sat up mourning the rest of the night. They set their brother's body on a bier and chanted grim mantras over it until dawn. At sunrise, they lashed the bloody corpse to the pile to take it to the burning ground in the forest. One of them saw Draupadi lounging against a carved pillar and cried, he died for her. Let him have her at least in death. His brothers took up the cry, bind her to his litter. Let us burn the Sarandri with Keechak. It will please his soul. Some of them went off to the king. They said to Virat, we want to burn the Sarandri with our brother. He loved her and we want to send her to him. Virat could hardly refuse what the powerful Upkeechaks asked today. Those Kshatriyas wasted no time in laying hold of Draupadi. They bound her hands and lashed her to Keechak's litter. Our brother was your lover. Let death not separate you. She began to scream, so the palace rang with her cries. My husband, save me. Oh, Jayesh, Vijay, Jayetishnu, Jay Bal, save me. You remember these were the names they gave at that time to be recognized among each other. Only Bhim in his kitchen heard her. The others had made sure they were far away from the dance hall, from where the funeral procession set out. Bhim heard her, but it was daylight now. He could not attack the Upkeechaks in the palace or the streets. He panicked, but only briefly. Then he ran out of his kitchen, away from the pallbearers, towards the high wall behind the palace. He scaled it easily and ran like his father, Vayu, to the forest. He took the shortest way and arrived at the cremation ground well before the Upkeechaks. Certain that none of her husbands had heard her, Draupadi screamed all along the march through the streets of Virat, lined with the people, out through the city gates, and down the road that led into the forest. She was bound firmly to the litter, her head at Keechak's feet. She screamed to the sky, the wind, to anyone who would hear her to please save her life. There was so much she had yet to live for. The Keechaks chuckled among themselves. In the forest, Bhim gnashed his teeth to hear Panchali's screams. He dared not go to her rescue yet. There was no telling how many Keechaks might escape him in the open. He pulled up a young sal tree by its roots and waited. Seething in the gloom, solemnly Keechak's brothers arrived in the forest. Without a word to one another or even to stop the Draupadi's screams, those 105 stalked towards the burning zone. The sun had risen above the trees, but this part of the forest was a dim place. From the dimness, with no warning, all hell broke loose over the funeral party. They hardly saw who attacked them. It had to be 100 spirits from Naraka, roaring horribly with trees for weapons, a demon flanks, forms of wind, warriors of air. Not 100, but 1,000 of them swirled at Keechak's brothers, bludgeoning their heads off or driving them bodily into the ground with terrific hammer blows, striking from every side and from death's awning that was the canopy. Even their screams were lost in that whirlwind. In a moment, 100 warriors were battered to death. Draupadi, who could not move from where they had dropped her, still lashed to Keechak's litter, screamed louder than ever. She did not know what was happening, and it was terrifying. 5 of Keechaks fled, but they did not escape. Bhim came howling after them and cut them off brutally in the open. The cremation ground in that forest was like a gory battlefield. Splashed with the blood, Draupadi lay whimpering among the Keechaks' corpses, hardly daring to hope it was her Bhim who had waylaid them, like Yam himself. But then it was indeed Bhim who ran up and knelt beside her, a kitchen knife flashing in his hand as he cut her loose. She rose, sobbing in relief. He wiped her tears with his great hands, so terrible a moment ago and so gentle now, and held her until she was quiet again. Bhim said, "How brave you were. You did not call our real names, even when you were frightened for your life. We must go back separately and hurry. God willing, no one will suspect anything." The guards at the city gates waited for the Keechaks to return after burning their brother and the flower girl. They were astounded to see the Sarandri walking up the king's road alone. Without a glance at them, she swept into the city, her dark head held high, her gaze fixed straight ahead of her. Word spread, the people ran out of their homes and lined the street along with Malini, walked to the palace, her clothes bloody, every inch of her exuding defiance. No one dared come near. Terror walked beside her. Word flew to Virat and Sudeshan that the Sarandri's Gandharvas had also killed Keechak's 105 brothers in the forest. She was unharmed and returning to the palace. Virat was petrified. He told his queen, "This woman's beauty is a deadly thing. She is irresistible, but if any man falls in love with her, her Gandharvas come and kill him. Sudeshni, your Sarandri is too dangerous to keep. Tell her she must leave today." Meanwhile, Draupadi arrived back in her chambers, exhausted, and flung herself down on her bed. She was blissful, and a delicious languor was upon her. She shut her eyes and drifted off into the bright dreams. But she did not dream long before a sharp knock on her door woke her. It was Sudeshni, her eyes red from crying, and fear in her voice. "You must leave at once," the queen breathed. "I gave you a home. I gave you freedom of my palace. I treated you not like a flower girl, but my own sister. This is how you have repaid me. My brother Keechak murdered at dead of night, and my stepbrothers slaughtered like rabbits on a hunt. You are a terrible woman, Sarandri. Go back to your Gandharvas. You are not welcome here for another moment." Malini faced her coolly. The flower girl was more regal than Sudeshni. The Sarandri told the queen, "I warned you time and again. of what would happen if your brother pursued me. He would not listen, and neither would you. As for your stepbrothers, they wanted to burn me alive. Would my husband stand for that? I am a chaste woman, O queen. I have not sinned in thought or deed. Sudeshan said, I want you out of here within the hour. Her voice firm, Malini replied, you have kept me like your sister these 11 months. The curse on my husbands will end in 13 days. Bear with me till then, and you shall find my husbands grateful. The queen said nothing, only stared dully at her flower girl. Draupadi sighed. I know how much you must hate me at this moment, but tolerate me for just 13 days more, and I swear you will be glad you did. The Sarandri spoke humbly, but the queen realized she did not leave her any choice. Numbly, Sudeshan said, I cannot refuse what you ask. I am afraid of you, but I beg you, don't let your husbands harm the king or me. Malini inclined her head, promising. Sudeshan said, stay for 13 days, but I don't want to see you during that time. The queen walked out of the flower girl's room. Next chapter, Duryodhana's spies. Meanwhile, Duryodhana's spies combed Bharatvarsh, all the kingdoms, all the sabhas, whispering questions among the people, but found no trace of the sons of Pandu. One by one, they came home to Hastinapur. One morning, when all his agents had returned, Duryodhana called them into his court, where he sat among his brothers with Karan, Dron, Bhishma, and the Trigarthas. Trigarthas are, this is like an ancient kingdom in the North India. So the people from there. The chief spy was an old and attenuated man. He had looked as he did now ever since Duryodhana knew him. He said, my lord, we have scoured the world for the Pandavas, but nowhere are they to be found. In no king's court, upon no mountain, nor hidden in any valley or forest. We went to Dwarka, but they were not there. We went to Panchal, disguised, and no one had seen or heard of them in Drupad's kingdom. We went among the people everywhere, but there was no sign of your cousins. Duryodhana sat perfectly still on his throne, watching his agent with unwinking eyes. Another spy, a man as old as first, said, my lord, we believe the Pandavas are dead. We went across the earth like the breeze. We went among the people like their very breath. If they all conspired to hide the sons of Pandu, at least their thoughts would betray them. And we are experts at reading men's minds. Duryodhan, it is as if the earth yawned open and swallowed your cousins. A third spy, a young fellow, was emboldened to cry, rule the world without a rival, Duryodhan. The Pandavas are not alive anymore. Duryodhan greeted all this with silence. His hooded gaze moved from one spy's face to the next. They shivered at his scrutiny. Then, apparently satisfied, he said, have you anything else of interest to report? The oldest spy now said, the world talks of the death of Matsya Senapati Keechaka. The man looked quickly at the Trigrats, and they shifted uncomfortably in their places. I think the Trigrats remember Keechak well. He defeated them often in battle. How was Keechak killed? He was strangled in a dance hall in the middle of the night, and no one saw the killer. They saw a beautiful woman was the cause of his death. They say she has a Gandharv husband who watches over her. Keechak tried to molest the woman, and he died. Another spy said, it was in the Matsya country myself. The day after Keechak was killed, his brothers tied the woman to his litter to burn her with him in the forest, but her Gandharv killed them all and set her free. Duryodhana said, the death of Keechak and his brothers is of passing interest to me. Give me news of the Pandavas. The time of the Agyatwas is almost over, and you have brought no word of them. The chief spy replied, we have told you, my lord, the sons of Pandu have vanished as if into the death's grasp. No trace remains of them that we should presume they are alive. Duryodhana gave his spies gold and dismissed them. Silence ruled the court, and the Kaurav said, the Agyatwas draws to an end. If we do not find them quickly, they will come asking for their kingdom. Let some cleverer agents be sent forth. Let them bring word of our cousins, or let them also confirm that Yudhishthir and his brothers are not to be found anywhere. Perhaps it is true the Pandavas are dead. They may have been eaten by wild animals in the forest. He savored the thought. Drona rose and said, Yudhishthir and his brothers are men of destiny. They were not born into this world to be killed before their time by wolves or tigers. Duryodhan, listen to me. I am your guru. For 13 years, you have enjoyed what belongs to the sons of Pandu. At least now, relent. When your cousins return, give them back their kingdom graciously. Beg their forgiveness, and even you might find salvation. If you dare make peace with the Pandavas, you will certainly find great fame. Bhisham said, the Acharya speaks truly. The Pandavas are alive, wherever they may be. Would my blood not cry out in my body if they died? Duryodhan, my son, it is later than you imagine. Retribution is not far, and I am full of fear for you. He sighed. I see in your eyes that you have no patience to hear what I have to say. I will be brief. Why? I will say all I have to in one word, Dharam. Duryodhan, where Dharam is, victory shall also be. No man in this ancient world, however powerful or wealthy, has ever escaped the truth. Relent, my child, give back what is not yours to keep. Seek Yudhishthir's forgiveness. He is noble and loves you still. Duryodhan ignored what they said and asked instead, but where have the Pandavas hidden themselves? He rose and began to pace the floor. Bhisham laughed. You have not found the Pandavas because you don't know where to look for them. Duryodhan stopped pacing. He turned to his grandfather. Do you know where to look, Pitama? Where Yudhishthir is, the land will be more fruitful than it has ever been before. The granary and the treasury will spill over in plenitude. The rain will come at its appointed time, and the harvest will be bounteous. The grace of God shall be upon the people of that land, and fear, anger, and envy will melt from their hearts. Yudhishthir's presence in that kingdom shall be as God's. For him, the birds of the sky will sing more joyfully, and the flowers of the field will bloom more brightly. The fruit on the trees will be sweeter than they have ever been. If he lives in a city, there will be music in the air, as if invisible gandharvas played by day and night. The milk the cows of that land yield will taste like Amrit. So Duryodhan, now you know where to look for the Pandavas. Send your spies to discover a kingdom in which there is a sudden surfeit of prosperity, and you will find Yudhishthir, Dharamputra, and his brothers there. Duryodhan stared at his grandfather. He began to speak, but Bhisham had not finished. Hear me out. I have something more to say to you. So far, I spoke as a loyal Kuru and as a courtier to his king. Now listen to what a grandfather says to his favorite grandson. I must tell you what my heart feels as well. Since you were a child, I was partial to you, even when I knew you were wrong. I always felt you were sensitive and vulnerable. Of all the princes in your generation, none is as generous as you are to those whom you love. You are brave and truly a Kshatriya. Today, a doting grandfather implores you, Duryodhan, repent. The Pandavas have suffered too long, and for no fault of theirs. You are not a young man anymore. Time has flown, and what you are today is not what you were 13 years ago. For 13 years, you have enjoyed this kingdom by yourself. You must have learned much during those years and fulfilled yourself in many ways you could not have before. Now it is time to take account of yourself. Give back what is theirs to your cousins. And rule the world with Yudhishthir as your ally. If you are united, no force on earth can stand against you both. Leave your childishness behind you, Duryodhan. Be a mature king. Age softens the mind. It must have softened yours. Let the end of the 13 years mark the end of your enmity with the sons of Pandu. Spend your last years in the world at peace with them. Bhisham's old eyes were bright with tears. Ah, my child, don't destroy yourself. Duryodhana's mouth was a thin line as he retorted, I can never do what you ask, Pitama. The Pandavas are my enemies. I hate them, and my hatred rules my very life. I will never give them back their kingdom. I will move heaven and earth, and I will find them. Wherever they are, then they must go back into the forest for another 12 years. Let those 12 years also pass, and perhaps I'll be old and soft enough to return their kingdom. Now Kripa said, no one can stop a man when he has decided to seek his own death. Duryodhan, you have chosen the path to doom. All of us see this clearly, and the astrologers say that the eclipse of the Pandavas' fortunes is almost over. Still you choose war. So I say to you as a warrior, since you have chosen an indomitable enemy, at least be prepared. Begin to collect an army such as the world has never seen. Send messengers to all the kings who came to your Vaishnava Yajna. Tell them about the war that will be and make sure they will stand with you. Duryodhan, the Pandavas are invincible. It is folly to fight with them. If fight them, you must. To be well prepared is your only hope. Duryodhan sat pensively through what Kripacharya said, nodding now and again to show he agreed. His thoughts were elsewhere. When Kripa finished, the Kaurav clapped his hands to summon a guard. Call back my spies who just left the Sabha. When the spies stood nervously before him again, he said, recount the death of Keechaka to us once more. Leave no detail out. When the spy who was in the Matsya kingdom repeated his story, Duryodhan's eyes shone and he cried, I should have known at once. It is so obvious. The others stared at him puzzled. Only Bhishma smiled. Dushashan asked, what is obvious? Duryodhan said, I know where the Pandavas are. Just 4 men on earth were so strong as Indra himself. Balram, Bhim, Shalya, and Keechaka was the 4th. Keechaka is dead. Only one of the other 3 could have killed him with bare hands. Which was it? It could not have been Balram or Shalya, or we would have known. Now consider the woman who was the cause of Keechaka's death, the queen's Sarandri. 11 months ago, she arrives mysteriously in the Matsya kingdom and tells Sudeshna about her Gandharva husbands, cursed to be apart from her for a year. She is dark, this Sarandri, and beautiful. Keechaka could never resist a beautiful woman and fell in love with her. The way you describe her, she is no ordinary beauty. Who is she, the flower girl for whom Keechaka is willing to sacrifice his very life? Who is she with the Gandharva husbands? He paused and looked around the Sabha. Karan and Dushashan breathed together. Draupadi. Duryodhan said, and it was Bhim who killed Keechaka. Don't you recognize our cousin's style? The head and the arms thrust into the torso, the body mutilated. Then there is the midnight assignation in the dance hall, the secrecy that shrouds the killing. Surely the Pandavas also lived disguised in the Matsya king's palace. Perhaps they serve Virata in some menial capacity. Bhim could not kill Keechaka openly, since he would risk being discovered. I would not be surprised if Yudhishthir and the others did not know about the plan. They may have thought it too dangerous, but not Draupadi or Bhim. Think how Keechak's brothers died in the forest, bludgeoned with a tree. If this is not my cousin Bhim's work. He was up and pacing the Sabha again, a predator who had scented his prey. He went on breathlessly. The spies say the Matsya kingdom has never known a harvest like the one they had this year. The king's coffers flow over. And if you think about it, Virat is just the kind of an old fool whose hospitality our cousins would seek. Dushashan was on his feet. We must attack the Matsya kingdom. Duryodhan said, the Matsya's cattle is their wealth. If we lift their herd with the Keechak dead, the noble Pandavas will come to their host's defense and back to the forest with them for another 12 years, gather an army. We ride at once. Susharma, king of the Trigrits, jumped up. I will ride with you, Duryodhan. The Matsyas humiliated me repeatedly when Keechak lived. Now that he is dead, I want revenge. I will attack Virat from the south and take the Matsya herd. That will fetch Virat's forces out. Without Keechak there, I will crush them. The day after I attack, you ride at them from the north. The Pandavas will have no choice but to show themselves. And Duryodhana, my friend, we will achieve both our ends. Karan cried, we welcome Susharma's plan. Two armies are always better than one. Duryodhan was already on his way out of the Sabha. Susharma, you ride ahead and attack Virat tomorrow. The day after, a crew army with Bhisham, Krip, Drona, and Ashwatthama, Karan, Shakuni, and Duryodhan will ride at the Virat from the north. Tomorrow is the 8th day after Amavasya, and the day after Navami, the 9th. Victory will be mine. With that, he was gone. The Sabha emptied itself. Only Drona, Bhisham, and Krip remained in it. Drona said to Bhisham, is this just? Shall we ride with Duryodhan to send the Pandavas back into exile? Bhisham smiled and answered cryptically, we ride tomorrow, but it will be less easy than Duryodhan imagines to send Yudhishthir into exile again. Meanwhile, Susharma already flew towards his capital to collect his army for the next day's exploit. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll start with the Virat's battle next Tuesday.